In this episode, I'll be chiming in on selling spirituality. First of all, what exactly do we mean by selling spirituality? If we're talking about commercializing off religious teachings or making people pay money to become initiated or embraced into the inner thresholds of a religion, then I'm totally against that. Anytime there is the commercializing of religious teachings, I run the other way and drag all of my friends with me. I am so strongly and zealously against if-then statements when it comes to religion and money. If you pay me X amount of money, then I will save your soul or remove all of your suffering or endow you with untold riches and fame, that kind of thing. Not cool. In fact, I'd go so far as to call it criminal. But contributing money to a religious institution or congregation or coven so that the group can have the collective funds to do stuff, then that's totally different. That's fine, because it's not marketed as if you pay me money, then I will save your soul or elevate you to a magical priestess of 10 degrees or anything like that. Instead, it's just, hey, we as a group need to raise X amount of money so we can do all these things together. What can you contribute? I think that's totally legit. I think where we start to see the serious divergence of perspectives is whether you should charge money for a tarot reading, whether you should charge money for crafting a spell or talisman, and whether you should charge money for, say, psychic or mediumship services. There's so much going on here as to why people would be against charging for spirituality-based services that it can get a little bit hard to unpack. So for instance, I used to be on the fence about it too and kind of wondered whether it was wrong and whether it was some sort of gift that should be freely gifted. But when I ask myself, okay, this is my opinion, but where is this opinion coming from? And then from there, realize that society has implanted that notion into my head. I had to ask myself, why has society implanted this notion into my head? What benefit does this notion serve to society, rather than me, that would cause a cultural and psychological manipulation toward antagonism of paying for tarot readings and witchcraft? An issue that orbits this topic that I haven't actually heard that many people talk about is the issue of socioeconomic disparity. Here's the thing, when we assume a body of knowledge comes from an education that pretty much requires you to be upper middle to upper class and to have a boatload of money so you can pay for tuition to get that education, then we think it's totally okay to charge money when you dispense that knowledge. But when we assume that a body of knowledge comes from somewhere else, namely an untraceable and intangible source of intuitive knowledge that money can't necessarily buy, where rich and poor are on level playing fields, suddenly those in power are not so keen on those not in power selling that knowledge. I think there's something to be said about fortune-telling, witchcraft, and holistic medicine often sourced from lower or working classes that cause us to shudder about its commodification. The halo effect is in full force. The halo effect is the irrational association with one physical, superficial factor to an intangible characteristic. So, for example, we associate beautiful people with benevolence and goodness. It's irrational. It doesn't actually make any sense, but we all do it. We assume beautiful people are more credible, more competent, more intelligent, and that's why beautiful people get ahead. And don't even object and say, no, you know better than that. No, you don't. It happens at a subconscious level because consciously, sure, we all know better with our mouths. We can verbalize that we know better. But at this subconscious level, we assume wealthy upper class people are more virtuous and lower class people are not virtuous. Therefore, anything lower class people have to offer come from a not virtuous place. So, spiritual services that have historically stemmed from the upper class we seem to be totally fine with. I'm not going to name names here, but I mean, do I even have to? I know you know exactly what I'm talking about already. All the major institutionalized religions, basically. But in contrast, spiritual services that have historically stemmed from the lower class we are suddenly not okay with, even though there is full equivalence. Why? Because of the halo effect. It's irrational, it's fucked up. We can verbalize an acknowledgement that it's fucked up, but at the subconscious level, we still get played by the halo effect all of the time. I can tell you that as a lawyer, an hour of work isn't the same as an hour of work as a tarot reader or pretty much doing anything spirituality or metaphysical related for someone. The best I can describe it is, as a lawyer, when you present your case, I mentally cross-reference your fact pattern with my experience and legal knowledge to then, kind of formulate an answer, or I know which books to read and where to look to find the answer. So I'm billing for my time and experience, but that's pretty much all I'm billing for. In comparison, as a tarot reader or metaphysical practitioner, when you come to me with your issue, my searching of the mental archives for the answer is accessing a part of my brain that isn't as effortless to access. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Every reading exhausts me or exhausts something inside of me in a profound way that, for example, giving legal advice never does. See, if we want to talk about overhead costs, the work of metaphysical practitioners costs them something that we haven't necessarily figured out how to concretize in dollar value, not perfectly at least. And practitioners who don't think their craft is costing them that piece of themselves, I'm sorry, you're just delusional. Not paying that practitioner money so he or she can nourish him or herself after having taken so much out of that person, and letting a practitioner find some way to restore that lost amount. I think that's just an insane position to take, personally. Not wanting to pay a practitioner or reader when they get it wrong is also another really irrational position to take. I don't know about you, but like 9 times out of 10 when I've gone to a medical doctor with my problem, forget healing me, they can't even diagnose me. They can't even tell me what's wrong. By and large, as a society, we begrudgingly pay the doctor anyway, even when the whole trip to the doctor's office was a waste of everybody's time, because the halo effect shields the doctor and subconsciously instructs us that we're lower, we're not as educated or informed, we don't know better, and the doctor is in a position above us. Same with lawyers. We assume, even when they're all sorts of fucked up, that somehow they are still above us. So it's only when malpractice gets seriously out of hand that we are like, okay, now hold up. And again, just so we're clear, all of this happens at an impulsive, subconscious, and irrational level. Fortune tellers, diviners, readers, witches, they're not above us. In fact, below us. We go to them for services and products, sure, but on some subconscious level, we assume we're the ones above them and they are below us. We assume we're more educated, more informed. We assume we know better. We assume the reader or witch is in a position below us. So they don't get the benefit of the doubt that doctors and lawyers get, even though when you really dice it down to the core, their services are rather similar. If you think spellcrafting is easy and effortless, then either you're doing it wrong or you don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, not sorry if I offend. It's also not a mysterious divine gift or a special kiss from the gods. It isn't any more special than being born beautiful, being born more athletic, or being born exceptionally talented at something. Sorry to downplay the witches and diviners out there, but it's actually no different than any other sort of occupational calling. You're just called passionately to a particular path in life. That's all it is. Why suddenly is it not okay to charge for that occupational calling? You become a scientist or a mathematician because some fundamental talents you have are keyed well to that professional path. Same with doctors and lawyers. Academically, you excelled at certain subjects in school better than everybody else, which ultimately leads you down a certain line of work. Tarot readers, astrologers, metaphysical practitioners of all stripes are the same. Something about their fundamental talents lead them down that path, and now it has become their occupational calling. If you're against tarot readers charging money for their readings, psychics or mediums charging for their services, or witches charging for charms and spells, ask yourself why exactly you're against it. Don't just stop at selling spirituality is wrong, or I'm uncomfortable with the idea of charging for spirituality. Be better than that and challenge yourself to dismantle why you actually feel the way you do. Chances are, if you're honest, you're going to hit the rock of classism. At the bottom of it, that's why we're against it. It doesn't even have anything to do with spirituality or your religion. Like I said, it has to do with classism because religions have historically, throughout all cultures, charged money for stuff. So it's a classist issue. To argue that there are fraudulent readers and witches and that's why selling such forms of spirituality is wrong. I'm no longer a 20-year-old philosophizing artsy hipster who likes to brag about the obscure books I read, so I can't cite to you which logical fallacy it is off the top of my head, but it is a logical fallacy. Of course, fraud is an issue. Of course, there are fraudulent fortune tellers, fraudulent tarot readers, fraudulent witches. I think you should follow some of the amazing readers and witches who are prominent forces in the community. They're almost always on the front lines of the battle against fraud. You know who comes out the most vocal and intolerant against fraudulent craft? Fellow practitioners of the business. When they see fraud in their community, they are like the first to sound the alarm. So no one is trying to sweep the dirt under the rug. Also, I always roll my eyes at the history argument. Historically, cunning folk and wise women or wise men didn't charge for their craft. Okay, first, let's assume at face value that's true. We did a lot of dumb shit in history that we don't do anymore because we realize as an advancing society that it didn't make any sense, especially when it comes to systemically marginalized groups of people like ethnic minorities, women, and hey, guess what? Witches. Second, I just don't think it's true, or at least it's not the full context. They were in some way materially compensated for what they did. I don't want to dive into a history lesson, but it doesn't take much research to get to the realization that when you're talking about trading or exchanging for these services of cunning folk, the context of that culture was a trading culture. So it had nothing to do with cunning folk. The economic system in play within that culture was trade and exchange. So what the fuck are you talking about? Also, again, historically, these types of practitioners were of the lower class, and most of their clientele were also of the lower class. So when money wasn't involved and instead they opted for an exchange, it's only because none of the parties involved had money. Historically, in so many societies, even after the country officially adopted a currency-based system, the lower rung of the socioeconomic ladder still continued a trade-based system because they didn't have any fucking money. And that's the tradition you seriously want to continue in this day and age. Finally, let's end on a personal story. My maternal grandfather was poor as all hell. It was the kind of poverty that Westerners today, by and large, can't even wrap their minds around. He was a street peddler, not even exaggerating. So early in the morning, and he and my grandmother would make tofu dishes and other perishables loaded onto a cart, and my grandfather would wheel his cart around the streets, and that's what he did for a living. On the side, when he's not pushing around his cart in the streets, he assembled packets of traditional Chinese medicine for the neighbors, which is using the term traditional Chinese medicine very, very loosely because it was like 2 parts magic and 1 part herbalism, if you get what I mean. And yeah, he did not do it for free. He was paid for it. Not a lot, not like he made a killing off of it, but it was kind of enough to supplement his meager day job income, if you can even call it a day job, to help him support his family of 6 or 7, I forgot how many aunts and uncles I have. And yet, despite coming from that legacy, I, here in America, basking in all of my privilege, was like, charging money for spirituality-related services is wrong. And I didn't change my opinion now because I became a professional tarot reader. I became a professional tarot reader because I woke up and changed my opinion. If you're against charging money for tarot readings, mediumship services, or spell crafting, I'm not going to be the one who changes your mind. Instead, I'm just asking you to search yourself and unpack what preconceived notions a classist, discriminatory society has implanted into you that causes you to believe what you do.